Hi, and thank you for joining us today on the Road to Recovery. I'm Ronda Jackson, your host, serial entrepreneur, and small business advocate. And today's conversation is for all my established and emerging entrepreneurs that are just sitting there going, what the heck? Like, how did we get here? And the professional that I brought today to guest with me is Marcus Moore. He is the founder and CEO of Genesis Professional Staffing. Welcome, Marcus, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, very much so, very much so. So, Marcus, I won't even do you justice, but award-winning, published author, entrepreneur. I mean, could you tell us a little bit more?
Oh gosh, you're embarrassing me. Let's see. I've been in the staffing industry for 20 years now, so I'm dating myself. I started Genesis. It's been 17 years ago in November.
Mhm.
Started a company and decided after working as a COO for another company for 3 years, and we amplified their sales quite a bit while I was there. I was like, hey, I can do this by myself. If I'm doing this well for someone else, why not do it for myself?
Yes.
Did that, started in Greenville, South Carolina, got a couple opportunities in Los Angeles, ended up moving my headquarters to Burbank, which is now home and I love. And yeah, we have pretty much worked in every single industry from entertainment, engineering, IT, government, healthcare, you name it. And so over the 17 years, we've had employees in 14 states and 3 countries. So we've worked hard and really proud of what led us to where we are today.
Well, thank you for sharing your genius with us. I think this is going to be a wonderful conversation. I feel like the nuggets that entrepreneurs are going to get out of this are going to be actionable. They're going to be able to proactively, just really get their hands back around their businesses and set it off into a new trajectory. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. So one of the things I do like to do is ask guests if they could describe in one word where we are right now, or one word they would just use to describe the universe. What would it be?
Challenging.
Okay.
Challenging.
Yeah.
I think the whole world is having to open their eyes to a lot of injustice. I think most people would think that I merely mean um, African Americans, but I actually think it's much, much greater than that.
Okay.
I think if there's one thing that's giving me a lot of hope through these challenges is that this is the first time that I've seen a lot of issues that are deemed Black issues be viewed as American issues.
Love.
I have seen a lot of stances being taken where it's not just Black people, it's white people linked in arm in arm, protecting their fellow Black brother and sister, trying to make sure that cops don't abuse them, don't hurt them in some way. I see the gay, lesbian, transgender, the LGBT community. They've become a part of the conversation, the Asian community, Hispanic community. It gives me hope. I think the challenges that we face are socioeconomic, and typically that's people who are people of color who have the least. I think if you look at every issue in our society right now, the biggest challenges comes from a lack of understanding or a lack of a desire to want to understand.
Got it.
And I think that's why things are so challenging now. But I am a firm believer that when the biggest challenges come, I think the greatest rewards can be reaped from that. And so I'm very anxious to see what America and what the world looks like 6 to 12 months from now, when COVID hopefully is being handled better than what we're having it handled right now.
Right, right. No, thank you for that. And I love the fact that you talked about limiting beliefs and the mindset that we as Americans, as people, tend to do depending on culture, upbringing, and those things like that. But the beautiful thing about shows like this is that we're trying to open people's minds and maybe even kind of change that perspective, change that camera lens so that people can look at things a little bit differently in the future. So,
Yes.
okay, but but in order sometimes to look at the future, you have to look at the past, right? So if you look at over the past 30, 60, 120 days, would you say that pandemic, civil unrest, caused problems in your business or amplified problems in your business?
think it's a culmination of both.
Okay.
Obviously, with COVID, people aren't buying products as much. A lot of my industry right now, we do a lot in entertainment, a lot in IT, and a lot in automotive. I made a conscious decision to try to diversify our offerings as much as possible. So many people in the world of staffing, they're always asked, what is your specialty? And I feel like people do that to try to pigeonhole you. And I was determined to not be that person because I didn't want to happen what is actually happening to me now to happen. So often you have peaks and valleys in every industry. And so I didn't want to be relying on one particular sector of work. But with something as large and as daunting as COVID, you can't avoid it no matter what industry you're in. You could own a tow truck company, you could be a nurse, you could be a CEO of a company, and every one of you will be adversely affected. We pretty much have lost, no joke, over 90% of our workforce in the last 4 months.
Wow.
90%. And this is not just in California, this is in multiple cities, multiple states, and probably, I don't know, 5 different sectors of work. And so there's nothing you can do to control it. Now, having said that, COVID might be the reasoning for those losses. But I also believe especially when you are a person of color, you are a woman-owned business, you are a disabled vet, let's be honest, a lot of times these organizations that say that diversity in the workplace is paramount to their success, you look at their boards and you know that's not true.
Yeah. Okay. So let's unpack a little of this. All right.
Sure.
So we have, pandemic, civil unrest, COVID. You mentioned some workplace issues. So if
Mhm.
you were to look at a root cause of those type of things, what would that root cause? And I'm talking internal things that we can control as entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
What would you say was a root cause? So you mentioned having done diversification to try to keep, your net casted wide enough to avoid having, a bunch of client loss, but still to be at 90%. Was there anything else that you could have tweaked or changed?
I'm not sure in my industry. I think in a lot of industries, they can focus on online orders or things like that.
Mhm.
I think the world of staffing is a very different industry as compared to every other. We are not reliant on ourselves.
Got it.
All of our business is human capital, and we don't determine who allows our people to go to work.
Mhm.
And secondly, oftentimes in staffing, because your people are the first one or the last ones hired, they're the first ones let go.
Yeah.
But if you can look at, even when you go back to 9/11 and you read some articles that was published in Time magazine, one of the best indicators of the US economy, it's always listed as 1, 2, or 3, is do you see temps at your job?
Mhm.
So because of that, when you don't see temps at the job, that's how you know the economy is going in the wrong direction and quickly.
Got
And
it.
so we don't determine a lot of times where our people are. One of the things that I thought we did so well was we did incorporate technology. We're one of the fortunate ones that do have employees that's not local, even though we're a smaller business, we're national. I made a conscious effort to not focus on one industry. We focus on an array of industries. I don't know how many more safeguards I could have
Mhm.
put in place, to be honest, because it still comes down to your clients having a need
Right.
and honestly not being able to fulfill on their contracts.
Right.
And it really
So,
is not
so
something I decide.
So what I hear you talking about are actually, you've actually given some remedies, right?
Mhm.
Because maybe there are businesses that didn't diversify their
Right.
client mix. Okay, so that was one. Then I heard you say about supply and demand. So understanding your customer's need in advance or in an interim, or like how you said, watching the whole industry and what's happening in the world, where if there is it sounds like unemployment went down, hiring went up, and then when there was still not enough retainable talent in the marketplace, that's when staffing agencies come in to supplement. So there's some, what I hear you saying is now to be aware of what's happening in the world, right? So you're saying like
Yes.
stay on top of that. And then, but I also remember in some of our earlier conversations, if you were to even pick a remedy, right? So I understand that you're acknowledging the fact that you've kind of max blast where you could, but if you were to pick a remedy, would you have diversified in online services that maybe explore your personal gifts and talents? I know that you're a published author, or would you look at some of those avenues?
You know, one of the things that I not even necessarily just from my organization, but one of the things that I would champion and I would highly encourage people to do.
Okay.
Uh, and I think this is one of my biggest peeves is that so many of us, small businesses, and especially small business and medium-sized businesses, we only want to go after the big fishes, the Apples, the Amazons, the Disneys. Well,
Mm,
there's a million people with that same concept, but what we don't realize is the majority of employers in this country are small and medium-sized businesses. They make up probably three-quarters of all the jobs in this country. So partner with other like-minded, small businesses who are trying to do something. Yeah, you may not get 15 orders, maybe you get two, but you establish this relationship, and that business needs your business as much as you need their business. And then maybe you can go after opportunities together. I mean, if there's one thing that I feel that I'm really proud of is that I have tried to take my time, my connections, my resources, the things that I've learned, and try to mentor other people. Because when I first started, no one told me how to run a business. I basically went to work for a guy, helped his business grow. And then the next time I came around and I met people, I'm like, hey, let me give you my research. Let me tell you what didn't work for me.
right.
I think that's one of the things that's so valuable. You can't get that in business school. I went to business school. You don't get that from that. The best people to train people how to run an effective business is your fellow business owner.
Yeah. And honestly, Marcus, remember, that's how you and I met 10,
Yeah.
15 years ago.
Yeah.
Me deer in the headlights at a conference.
You are not a headlights.
Come here,
You
little
are
girl.
one of the things that I would say about you that I love the most, you always got a pen and pad. You're never afraid to ask questions. And my favorite thing, you listen. Now, you don't have to agree, but you listen. I know so many people spend their lives researching, they never implement. And there's nothing more frustrating than someone who gives you their time, their effort, their resources, than to keep telling you the same thing and you don't do anything with it.
Right.
So, people always say, hey, can you find a star? A star is not a star when you first meet them. You know what I'm saying? Like they become a star. So you have to find a hunger, a desire, and a person who's willing to put the risk out there, because I don't know a small business or a business owner, period, that's risk averse. You have to have some riskiness to do this, because owning a business will drive you insane if you're not passionate about it.
All right. So give us that next call to action. Tell us what we need to be doing. One thing, just today. What is it? What would you tell me today to do?
Keep the faith.
Ah,
This day will pass. I mean, we've gone through assassination of great leaders.
mhm.
We've gone through space shuttles blowing up in the air. We've gone through 9/11. We got people still in Flint, Michigan who don't have clean water.
Yeah.
We've had bad presidents before. We've had good presidents before, not taking any shots.
Right.
Well, kind of taking a shot. Um, and all those things, it's not the end of the world. I mean, this isn't The Walking Dead. This isn't going to be zombies on the street.
Right.
I just think we have to stick together.
Mhm.
As much time as we spend being frustrated, even sometimes justifiably complaining, we need to spend as much time coming up with a resolute solution, because you're seeing change happening right now, where
Real.
companies are evaluating themselves and saying, is our diversity program nothing more than PR?
Right.
I would venture to say a lot of them, that's what they've been the last 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
And if they ask me, I would tell them. I think we have to get to a place where our society is not so sensitive
Mhm.
and we can take constructive criticism. And then once we take that criticism, we go back to what I said earlier. We are empowered and we feel strong enough about ourselves to implement that change.
Yes. No, that is so beautiful. Beautifully said, Marcus. That is just going
Thank
to,
you.
honestly, I think today you're going to change the world. No, this was
Way
a
too time.
conversation, but listen, business overlaps and it's rare. It is rare that we have an issue that is so global and it
Correct.
affects the world. This isn't about an industry. This isn't about a segment of people like you point out it in your earlier conversation. This is about the world, and
Yeah.
we're about to change the world. So I'm just going to recommend that all these entrepreneurs keep the faith, like Marcus says. Ladies, hold on to your hair hats because we are in for a ride. But come to a show like this where we can arm you and equip you with the information. And like Marcus said, if you implement it, you'll see the transformation. So we thank you for joining us today. Thank you again, Marcus, for being my guest. I really
Thank you for having me.
No, anytime. Thank you for your time.